The first time I realized something was wrong was when I went to pick tomatoes and half of them were gone. I stood in the middle of my garden, holding the empty bucket, trying to understand. They were there yesterday, red, juicy, at the perfect point for harvesting. Now there were only a few left, and the branches were crumpled, as if someone had handled them carelessly. At the time, I thought that maybe some animal had invaded my garden. Raccoons, perhaps. But raccoons leave traces. They bite vegetables. They make a mess. These tomatoes didn't have a single bite. I thought it was strange, but I let it go until it happened again. The following week, I went to pick lettuces and found the exact holes where they had been ripped out. Not bitten, not destroyed, harvested. The third week, I started counting how many carrots were growing, and the next morning, 6 of them were gone. That's when I realized this wasn't an animal, this was a thief, and the person was getting bold. Before, only a few things went missing. Now, the person was taking the vegetables as if my garden were a free grocery store. The question was, who the hell would do that? My neighborhood wasn't exactly a place where people were in need. On the contrary, it was a gated community controlled by the HOA, full of stuck-up people who paid a fortune to have standardized lawns and white picket fences. And, ironically, it was these same people who hated my garden. From the moment I bought the house, the HOA picked on me. First came the polite letters, suggesting that perhaps a vegetable garden wouldn't match the aesthetics of the neighborhood. Then came the veiled threats, saying that my land could attract pests and that I should at least put up a fence, which, let's face it, was just an excuse to hide what they thought was ugly. The HOA didn't like anything that got out of hand, and now someone from there was stealing my garden, only it wouldn't last. Instead of wasting time complaining, I decided to be smart. I didn't call the police. I didn't buy expensive cameras. I just did the simplest thing in the world. I sat on the balcony and waited. If someone was stealing my vegetables, sooner or later they were going to come back, and I'd be there to see it. That night, the neighborhood was silent. The wind swayed the trees, the crickets played their annoying symphony, and I kept an eye on the garden, drinking coffee so as not to doze off. It was 1 a.m. Nothing. Dog hunte, still nothing. I was beginning to think that maybe it had been a bad idea to lose my night's sleep over this. Then I heard a noise, a rustle among the leaves, the faint sound of footsteps on the ground. The adrenaline surged instantly. I stood still, my eyes adjusting to the darkness, waiting to see who would dare invade my property. And then, there she was, the woman who ran the HOA like a mad queen, who spent her days making up absurd rules, who had already tried to fine me for leaving garden tools out in the open. The woman who said that my garden didn't belong in the neighborhood was now harvesting from it. At first, I was shocked. She moved with the precision of someone who had done it before. She squatted down, picked out the best vegetables, picked the ripest, filled a bag as if it were a normal shopping day. She was so daring that, after picking a few tomatoes and a handful of herbs, she smiled. She smiled, as if she was pleased with her loot, as if she was taking home a trophy. That's when my shock turned to anger. She hated my garden. She said it was ugly, that it spoiled the luxury standard of the neighborhood. But in the dead of night, she was taking advantage of it, and she really thought she'd never get caught. I happened to be there, and while she was enjoying her criminal harvest, I was recording everything. I didn't shout, I didn't make a fuss. I just raised my cell phone and started recording. She didn't see me, she just finished her illegal purchase and left quietly, disappearing down the street, as if she hadn't just stolen from me. I smiled, because I knew I'd just been given a free pass to get even. If she wanted to eat from my garden so badly, then I was going to make sure her next meal was unforgettable. The next morning, I sat on the balcony with a cup of coffee and waited. It didn't take long. At 7 a.m. sharp, the woman appeared. She always made a point of walking past my house as if she was inspecting something, as if she owned the neighborhood. But that day, there was something different about her. She seemed especially pleased. And I knew exactly why. The night before, I had seen everything. The way she moved among the plants as if it were a secret ritual, the way she chose the best vegetables and put them in the bag without haste, without fear, without even imagining that she was being recorded. She made a point of stealing only the most mature, the most beautiful, the ones I'd been looking after for weeks. And now, there she was, strolling along as if it were a normal morning, carrying her ridiculously expensive thermos and her pose of superiority. I almost laughed. She didn't know. She still thought she was untouchable. I could just expose the video to the whole neighborhood, show those snobbish residents that the woman who kept saying that my garden spoiled the aesthetics of the neighborhood was literally feeding on it. But that would be too easy. I wanted something better, something memorable, something that would make her never want to look at a vegetable again in her life. So I went out to my shed and got to work. I spent the day preparing my special harvest. The ingredients were simple: cayenne pepper powder, castor oil, and a touch of natural laxative, just enough to ensure that her meal would be unforgettable. I took some vegetables that were still in the garden and bathed the peels in this powerful mixture. The trick was simple. Since she took the vegetables unwashed at the time, but probably kept them in the fridge to eat later, the entire surface would be impregnated with my surprise. So I waited. That night, I left the garden untouched. If I tried to stop her from stealing, she would just wait a few days and come back when she thought it was safe. But if she thought everything was still normal, then she'd fall straight into the trap. And that's exactly what happened. When the clock struck 1 a.m., I knew what to expect, and she didn't let me down. The woman showed up at the same time as always, with the same bag, the same meticulous ritual of picking the perfect vegetables. And as she moved around the garden, plucking the carrots, picking the tomatoes, and grabbing a few basil leaves, I just watched, holding back my laughter. Because, little did she know, that was the last theft she would ever make. The next morning, I stood on the balcony again, drinking coffee, waiting. At 7 a.m., she showed up, but this time, there was something different. She was walking too fast, sweating, as if she was trying to hold on to something. Her usual thermos was in her hand, but she didn't look as calm as she had on other days. On the contrary. And then, it happened. Halfway there, she suddenly stopped. Her eyes went wide. Her whole body went rigid. She clutched her stomach and panicked. And it was at that moment that she realized something terribly wrong was happening. And what about me? I made myself more comfortable in the chair and took another sip of coffee. The woman was a mess. Her face, once always made up and flawless, was now pale, sweaty, overcome with despair. Her hands were shaking. Her body was tense. She held her stomach as if she were trying to contain an internal hurricane. I almost felt sorry. Almost. But then I remembered the vegetables disappearing night after night. I remembered her arrogance. I remembered her satisfied smile every time she walked past my house, knowing that she was stealing from me without suffering any consequences, and any trace of pity disappeared. She deserved it. And from the way she was staggering down the street, the punishment was hitting hard. It wasn't long before the full effect of my trap reached its apex. The woman began to walk faster. The walk turned into a trot. The trot turned into a desperate run. She wanted to hold on, but it wasn't something that could be held. The castor oil was doing its job. The natural laxative was accomplishing its mission with surgical precision. And the cayenne pepper? That was the special touch. Not only did she need to go to the bathroom now, but she was about to find out the hard way that pepper and the digestive system are not friends. She ran to her house, tried to open the door, and failed. The desperation in her eyes was beautiful to watch. The woman had forgotten her key inside the house. She tried to open the garage door. Nothing. She tried the back door. It was locked. And that's when she realized she wasn't going to be able to hold it. But she still tried. My God, how she tried. Her knees began to buckle. She closed her eyes, squeezed her legs together, swayed her body, as if she were performing a shamanic ritual to try and buy more time. But there was no ritual in the world capable of holding her back. And then it happened. In the middle of the balcony, right in front of her own house, she lost the battle. And what's worse, the neighbors saw everything. The whole neighborhood was awake. It was a gated community where everyone meddled in everyone else's business. And when they saw the great queen of the HOA writhing in the middle of the street, running like she was fleeing from a fire, people started to pay attention. Mr. Phelps, the gossipy retiree, went out to get the paper just in time. He froze in place, squinting his eyes to try to understand what the hell was going on. Mrs. Jenkins, who had always hated the woman, was already on the lawn with her cell phone in her hand, recording everything. Other neighbors were peeking through the windows, holding back laughter, exchanging complicit glances. The woman was completely alone, and worse, completely ruined. After the biological disaster that had occurred right there in front of everyone, she finally managed to open the door and disappeared into the house. But the damage had already been done. The whole neighborhood had witnessed the greatest humiliation of her life. And what about me? I just sat on the balcony, took a long sip of coffee, and smiled. The woman disappeared for days. After the disaster we witnessed, no one saw her leave the house. The front door remained closed, the curtains always drawn, and the only sign of life was her husband's truck, which came and went as if nothing had happened. But the neighborhood knew. Everyone knew. The HOA, which always acted as if it were a parallel government, lost its queen overnight. No one took their ridiculous rules seriously anymore. People started planting colorful flowers without asking permission, leaving bicycles on the sidewalk without fear of fines, parking on the streets without worrying about threatening tickets. It was as if the spell had been broken, but I knew she wouldn't accept defeat so easily. The woman never knew how to lose, and I was right. On Monday morning, I received an official letter from the HOA. As soon as I saw the envelope, I knew it was some kind of joke. I tore open the side and pulled the paper out. The message was so ridiculous that I had to read it twice to believe it. Notice of infraction. Your yard exceeds HOA standards. You have 7 days to remove it, or you will face penalties. I had to laugh. After all, she was still trying to intimidate me. But the big difference? This time, no one was on her side. When I told the neighbors about the letter, the outrage was instantaneous. Mr. Phelps slammed the newspaper down on the table and said it was ridiculous abuse. Mrs. Jenkins, who already didn't like her, promised to spread the word to everyone in the neighborhood group. Even some HOA members no longer wanted to be associated with this tomfoolery. It was then that I realized what had really happened. She wasn't just trying to get to me. She was trying to regain control. After the public humiliation, after becoming the biggest meme in the condominium, this was her last card. If she could get me to remove the garden, if she could force me to bend my knees in front of the HOA, maybe she could restore at least a little of her old power. But there was one small detail that she ignored. The HOA wasn't the boss of me. My house, my land, my garden were outside its jurisdiction. So I did the most obvious thing in the world. I took the note, wrote a note on the back, and left it in her mailbox. If you want more vegetables, just ask. But be careful not to overdo the pepper again. That evening, I watched as she opened her mailbox. She pulled the mail out impatiently, as she always did, her movements rigid and full of tension. But when her eyes landed on the note, her whole body went still for a few seconds. The dim light from the street lamp illuminated her face, and, even from a distance, I could see her expression harden. She unfolded the paper and read each word slowly. Her lips tightened into a thin line. Her nostrils flared, and then, without warning, her fingers closed around the note so tightly that the paper creaked before being crushed into a trembling fist. Without hesitation, she threw it on the floor, as if she wanted to erase any trace of that message, as if she could destroy what had already been decided. But she couldn't. Her time there was over, and there was nothing she could do to change that. After that, the HOA was never the same. The changes were subtle at first, little whispers between neighbors, glances exchanged during board meetings, the sudden absence of certain rules that had previously been imposed with an iron fist. People began to realize that they didn't have to blindly obey the orders of the woman who once reigned over the neighborhood like a dictator. She was no longer untouchable. Her word was no longer law. And when this realization spread, everything fell apart for her. One by one, her allies disappeared. Those who had once followed her blindly began to shun her. Some even tried to distance themselves, denying any involvement with her authoritarian decisions. It wasn't long before she was completely alone. No look of complicity, no voice of support. The respect she had once demanded with threats and abusive fines was blown away like dust in the wind. And a few weeks later, the for sale sign appeared in front of her house, discreetly at first, as if she still hoped that no one would notice her defeat. But everyone saw it, everyone commented on it, and when the removal trucks finally pulled up in front of their house, no one offered to help. No one even said goodbye. She left without saying a word. She just locked the door for the last time, got in her car, and drove off, disappearing around the corner. No goodbye, no last attempt to take back her power. Just silence. And no one asked where. No one was missed. The HOA moved on. The neighborhood began to flourish without its stifling rules. People breathed a sigh of relief, enjoying a freedom they had forgotten existed. Christmas decorations once again adorned the facades without fear of ridiculous fines. Children played in the yard without the fear of being too noisy. The atmosphere changed, and life became lighter. And what about me? Well, my vegetables never disappeared. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a comment and a like.